Welcome back, everybody, to Dungeon Brew. Today, John and I are going to be discussing Gnolls in regards to our Monster Tactics series. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Dungeon Brew.
Welcome back, everybody, to Dungeon Brew. We're continuing our series on Monster Tactics, and today we're going to be talking about Gnolls. Before we get started, please make sure to like and subscribe to help us grow. John, why don't you, get us started? I mean, these are some ferocious, brutal creatures. How do you think about Gnolls?
Well, I think about Gnolls as a hybrid of gnomes and trolls, which, interestingly enough, I believe was their origin, specifically in like the Mystara campaign setting. But if you're looking at it nowadays, they are something of the spawn of 𝐦𝐤𝐤, which is a little bit different, just a little. But the interesting thing about them is that demonic origin plays a lot into the way that they behave. They just kind of have that thirst and that bloodlust and that demonic madness that goes along with their origins that make them truly terrifying creatures to encounter from a PC perspective.
Yeah, I don't ever think of Gnolls as being like that humanoid creature monster that you can negotiate with or reason with by any means. Like, they're just, again, they're driven to be brutal. They're vicious in their engagement. They love destruction. And when I think about approaching them in battle, it's like, who are you going to take down first? Because you know they're going to be coming at you full throttle.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because they don't really have a language necessarily. It's not the same as a goblin or an orc or whatever, where it's like, oh, there's kind of like that, the monstrous origins from the beginning of DnD that it's kind of like petering away, where it's like they're more humanoid than monstrous. Mm-hmm. The Gnolls have almost done the reverse, because it's no longer the gnome troll hybrid. It's entirely monstrous. Their communication is completely limited to the sounds that you would expect basically from a hyena, and not really much else. But that being said, they're still remarkably clever. I mean, they have a slightly below intelligence or below average intelligence, but they still have that kind of cunning associated with them. But that's primarily kind of the same way that you would expect from a wolf pack. And that's generally how I think of Gnolls, is I think of them as being hunters that move through as fast as they can, seeking out prey, and they take the prey down, and then they consume, and then they repeat. And that's kind of their entire existence, is just doing that, except that they have a delight in bloodshed and carnage and everything else in a way that you wouldn't expect from a wolf pack. So that's generally how I prefer to think of them as a monster, and how I think of them when it comes to tactics.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you're pointing out that there's a hierarchical structure within a Gnoll warband itself. So even though you may think of them as being a little bit reckless in their approach to battle, there is some uniformity in communication that may be occurring in this guttural, instinctual, maybe engagement between the Gnolls in that warband, even if the people who are witnessing it aren't understanding what exactly is going on, in the same way that you may say with wolves or other individuals in that particular area. But man, there's something else I wanted to add into that you had mentioned. I'm going to process through all the things that you said, but I do appreciate that you're saying they're hierarchical in the way that they approach things, because I think that that's important to notate.
Yeah, and they have like, there's the Gnoll pack leader. If you're like looking through the monster manuals and Volo's Guide and things like that, there's the Gnoll pack leader. There's the chosen of 𝐦𝐤𝐤. There's the Flind, which is the apex of all Gnolls. But getting into the tactics here a little bit, they don't have, they're nomadic, right? So they don't have permanent defenses or structures or anything else like that. They're constantly on the move. So when we were talking about kobolds and we were talking about goblins, they always have a base to go back to. They have a safe place to go to if things get too hot. The Gnolls don't really have that. They spend most of their existence randomly going from location to location, trying to kill and wreak havoc and then consume and then repeat. That's pretty much all they do. Their primary focus is on the weak. So they're not particularly interested in strong or intelligent opponents that are able to fight back, because that would be dangerous to them. They're wanting to kill and consume. They don't want to die necessarily, or they don't want to take harm, and that's kind of their movements continuously. That being said, if they're compelled by 𝐸𝐤𝐤, they're exceptionally resilient and dangerous. If they're being driven by their demonic origin, then there is nothing that will stop them from pressing as hard as they can, even against fortified structures, where that type of overwhelming attack is considered to be absolutely terrifying on the part of the defenders and almost impossible to repel.
Yeah, what you're saying here is what I was going to jump into. The Gnolls, the first monster that we're really talking about, that is like a scourge. Like
Right.
They are wanting to just wipe out the living, so to speak, to kind of feed their own desires or to feed their own hunger. And whenever you're putting Gnolls into combat, this is kind of reinforcing your comment here, they have no benefit to have like a strategic standpoint to overtake some stronghold. They have no interest in like managing the resources that are being shipped up and down a particular river. Those types of like things do not motivate them to engage. They're looking for, oh, this party's sleeping in a cave and they can't get out. We can take advantage of this and feed on them.
Yeah, they're not going to manage supply lines. They don't have siege engines. None of them are smiths or anything else like that. They're scavengers, the same way that hyenas are scavengers. So all of their equipment is gotten from someone else who has made it before them. All of their food comes from that which they hunt. Primarily, when I'm using them, they are used as a hunting party or a war band. They are moving from location to location. So there's two ways that basically happens, I think, from a DM PC perspective. One is that the PCs are chasing a Gnoll band, because the Gnoll band has been wreaking havoc in the territory, and they have to be able to chase them down, which is difficult to do because they're relatively fast moving and they don't want to be caught. They don't want to engage with the party because the party is dangerous. Option two is that the Gnoll warband outnumbers the PCs and they're chasing them. So it's a reversal of fortunes, and if the PCs get caught, then they're going to get overwhelmed, and so it's in the PC's best interest to move to a location that is defensible, that will repel the Gnolls, because they don't want to try and overcome something that is stronger than they are unless they're compelled to do so. So those are kind of the two directions. As far as the Gnolls go, I don't believe that they have a whole lot of defensive strategy. Their strategy is run, move away, and they will stop long enough to kill and consume, and then they will continue to move away, and that's pretty much what they do. They might have some basic understanding of, trying to double back or move in different directions or things like that, but most of their cunning comes from the hunting, not from the fleeing, and that's generally what they want to do, if they even have the awareness that they're being hunted to begin with, which I think might be a stretch.
Which is probably the only last thing that I have to add about Gnolls, in that this is why you oftentimes see in certain campaigns Gnolls behaving in ways that are not aligned with what a Gnoll is, that raises suspicions from adventuring parties. And I think more often than not, I see campaigns and campaign settings that provide that without really highlighting the fact that this is abnormal to Gnollish behavior. Where you see Gnolls actually controlling supply lines, or Gnolls like moving in unison or in armies or functioning in some way that just doesn't make sense to them, because there's a BBG on the back end that is somehow using magic to control them and organize them in some way. But at the front end, that's not typical for Gnolls. The things that we're talking about is your Gnoll tactics.
Yeah, their allies are few and far between. Hyenas, trolls, a few random creatures like that is about as far as it makes it. But as far as their tactics go in the hunt, I think that those are very clear. Like I said, they try and run their prey into the ground. They have Gnoll hunters with longbows that inflict movement penalties. So if they can get close enough to fire a longbow and hit you, then they're going to try and slow you down. One of the other ones, I think, out of Bolos is like the Fleshnar or the something like that, and he has an ability to move at exceptional speeds. So The gnolls are going to chase their prey. They're going to try and get in close enough range to be able to hit them with ranged shots to slow them down, and then they're going to swarm. And when they go into swarm, they're going to try and target the weakest ones that they can possibly imagine, or that they can possibly get their claws on, because they want to kill and consume immediately. And if they manage to kill, then they immediately use their rampage ability to move on to the next target, because that's what they're doing, is kill, move on, and that's how they operate. So if they meet too much resistance, they'll flee, because they're not interested in dying unless there is a compulsion, usually coming from the Chosen of Yeenagu or one of the Flyns that are have that direct connection to their demonic lord that is going to tell them to continue to attack. At which point they might fight to the death, but for the most part, if they meet too much resistance, they flee, at which point it gets reversed. But generally speaking, if they are hunting something, then they are either compelled to do it, or they are way outnumbering it to the point to where they don't think that they're going to fail.
Starting to see a pattern here, John. We're on our third monster, and none of these yet fight to the death. Yet every campaign I watch, people are fighting to the death.
Yes, and I think that's a really good call out. Morale is a very important aspect of monstrous creatures when they fight. They're just like you and me. They don't want to die, and if push comes to shove and they have the opportunity to escape with their lives, they're probably going to take it. Yeah, and I think that adds definitely a level of realism into many of the tactics and strategies of these monsters that is missing. And in particular for the gnolls, they're more animalistic in a lot of ways than many other creatures, and that's kind of how animals behave. Is if they take too much harm, then they try and go back and hide and lick their wounds. They don't want to stay there until they die. It's their survival instinct at play.
All right. Well, I hope that you guys have enjoyed this. If that's all, John.
Yeah.
On Gnolls, I hope you guys enjoyed this video again here on Dungeon Brew. Again, hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a comment. Let us know how you've used Gnolls in your own campaign or a particular adventure that you had where you had to face these monsters in combat. We'll talk to you next time.
Dungeon Brew.